These will be very brief observations, but I think certainly in the African American tradition, the writing not only reflects the pain and the struggle of racism, but there's also aspects of it that are liberatory, aspects of people overcoming the obstacles that racism and racial oppression put in their way. And I think another thing that African American writers think about are positive role models to give people sort of images of what they should do when they're faced with racism and racial oppression. So yes, it does very much capture the pain, which I think I heard you talk about. But it's also a little more than that too. There's also that liberating aspect of it, which is very, very critical. And I see Professor Page wants to jump in.
I would like to say that African American literature, especially early African American literature, starting with Martin Delany's Blake or Huts of America from 1859, talks about kind of moving African Americans from a position of enslavement to a position of freedom. And in that book, Blake proposes a narrative where the main character is able to incite slave revolts throughout the South and eventually try to start a slave revolt in Cuba, transforming, like, moving the revolt from just an American context to a global context and making it an international movement against slavery. And you can see how many of the novels written by African Americans are either allegorical, autobiographical, and they also contain those aspects of enslavement and the problems within that, and also talk about freedom and their ideas of freedom, and those are developed over the course of time. Especially during the Harlem Renaissance, you can see different ideas of freedom being articulated by different writers. So you have like Claude McKay's If We Must Die, and that poem and its representation for the struggle that African Americans faced with discrimination and Jim Crow. And then you also have Du Bois writing Dark Princess, which is a really important text, I think, that is often excluded from different courses because it talks about Du Bois coming to India in particular and starting a revolution with the Indian people and the African people and creating that kind of global conference to incite a new revolution. And in the end, he believes that, the protagonist believes that the only way to overcome race and discrimination is through this intermarriage between all the races and all the oppressed people in the world. So as early as 1928, we can see African American literature branching out and seeking new ways to find freedom that don't have to fit within the narrow confines of freedom as defined by the United States and white supremacy. Okay, my last statement would be, as of recent, and even in the 1950s, you could see the literature branching and how people were influenced by each other. So you have, okay, let me get my notes together. You have Du Bois influencing Chinua Achebe. You have also inspiring Derek Walcott in the Caribbean. You have this kind of network of how the literature is passing and moving and inspiring around the world. And I'm looking forward to reading more Dalit literature, to seeing how those trends have connected, how African American literature and Dalit literature are kind of using some of the same tools and the same literary devices to promote these new ideas of freedom. So, and I thank you for all of your commentary. And I'm looking forward to talking with you all more about this later. Okay.